I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it. That's the bit that excites me, is the idea of being able to bring some change. Not overly radical change, but changes that I think.
The doors closed, the conversation stopped, and according to claims that quickly spread across royal watchers, Prince William had just placed a confidential file on the table that no one in the room expected to see. Within hours, one explosive rumor began racing across social media and royal forums. Had something happened behind palace walls that could change Queen Camilla's future forever? The palace said nothing. No official statement appeared, yet the silence only fueled the speculation. What could William have uncovered that reportedly left even senior royal advisors stunned? And why were whispers suddenly growing that Camilla's place inside the royal family had become the subject of an extraordinary private debate? Tonight, we're taking a closer look at the reports.
When William came home unexpectedly for the weekend from Eton, Camilla offered to leave, but Charles thought it right that they get it over with. He took her to the flat William had at Clarence House and left them to talk for half an hour. According to Penny Jr., at the end of the conversation, Camilla came out saying, "I need a drink."
The controversy and the questions that continue to divide royal watchers around the world. A heavy silence reportedly settled over the palace room before anyone dared to speak. Prince William remained standing with a slim folder resting against the polished table, while several senior advisors exchanged uneasy glances. According to the fictional royal narrative, no one expected the meeting to take this turn. The discussion had begun as another routine review of palace affairs, yet within minutes the atmosphere shifted into something far more serious. King Charles looked toward his eldest son, as though waiting for an explanation that might undo the growing tension. But William's expression never changed. Every eye in the room stayed fixed on the documents in his hands, because whatever they contained appeared to have rewritten the conversation before a single page had even been read aloud. Outside the palace gates, the public carried on as usual, unaware that behind centuries-old walls, an alleged chain of private discussions had reached a critical moment. Palace officials, legal advisors, and trusted household staff had reportedly gathered under strict confidentiality. No photographers witnessed the meeting. No official statement followed. Yet whispers of an extraordinary disagreement soon began circulating among royal commentators. According to those rumors, the question was no longer simply about protecting the monarchy's image. It had become a question of whether one revelation could permanently alter relationships at the very center of the royal family. If those reports were even partially true, then the consequences stretched far beyond one individual. They pointed toward a struggle between preserving tradition and safeguarding the institution's future. The alleged dispute was said to involve confidential records, private conversations, and difficult decisions that had remained hidden from public view for years. While none of these claims had been verified, they created a mystery that quickly captured the imagination of royal watchers around the world. What exactly had Prince William uncovered that left experienced palace figures reportedly speechless? Before this story unfolds any further, there is one question worth asking. Hi viewers, if you believe the royal family should always put duty and honesty above everything else, no matter who is involved, type "duty first" in the comments. And if you enjoy uncovering the royal stories everyone is talking about, subscribe, like this video, and share it with another royal watcher. Every like and every share helps this channel continue bringing you these fascinating royal discussions that the headlines often leave unanswered. With someone who follows the royal family closely, there is much more ahead, and each new detail makes the mystery even deeper. The first words reportedly spoken after the silence were not dramatic. They were measured. William allegedly requested that everyone remain patient until the material had been reviewed in full. According to the fictional narrative, he stressed that no conclusions should be drawn before every document had been examined carefully. That request alone reportedly surprised several people in attendance. Rather than making accusations, he appeared determined to let the records speak for themselves. Even those who disagreed with him were said to acknowledge that the discussion deserved careful attention. King Charles reportedly listened without interruption. Observers in this imagined account describe a monarch caught between two responsibilities that could not easily coexist. One demanded loyalty to family, the other demanded loyalty to the crown itself. Those present...
It was a very sensitive, difficult time for Camilla, because even though, she was the long-term girlfriend, well established with Charles, she often wasn't allowed to sit with him, particularly at big state occasions. And the final straw, by all accounts, came.
Allegedly noticed long pauses between responses, with every sentence weighed carefully before being spoken. No raised voices echoed through the room. Instead, uncertainty became far more unsettling than anger. According to palace speculation within this story, the review had not appeared overnight. It was said to be the result of months of quiet preparation involving senior household officials tasked with examining matters affecting the monarchy's long-term reputation. Routine assessments gradually expanded into broader discussions about transparency, governance, and public confidence. At first, few believed those reviews would reach the desks of the most senior members of the family. Yet as more information allegedly surfaced, it became increasingly difficult to ignore. William's growing role within the institution had already attracted attention long before this reported meeting. As heir apparent, many believed he was preparing for the responsibilities that would eventually fall upon him. Supporters viewed his approach as disciplined and forward-looking. Others worried that greater scrutiny inside the palace might reopen painful chapters many believed had been left in the past. Whatever the truth, expectations surrounding his leadership continued to grow with every public appearance and every private responsibility quietly entrusted to him. Beyond the palace walls, commentators frequently debated how the monarchy should adapt to changing times while preserving traditions that had defined it for generations. Every public engagement, every family appearance, and every official statement was examined for hidden meaning.
The interaction feels formal and possibly forced. While we don't know the exact context of this picture, we do know that Camilla had told friends at this point that she was surprised at the unexpected side to William that she had found. "The boy's got a temper," she apparently said. In Robert Lacey's book, Battle of the Brothers, he writes,
Small gestures became headline news. Brief conversations sparked endless speculation. Against that backdrop, rumors of confidential palace reviews spread quickly because they seemed to fit a larger story many believed was already unfolding behind closed doors. Within the fictional account, Queen Camilla continued carrying out her public duties without any visible indication that private discussions were allegedly becoming more complicated. Engagements proceeded according to schedule. Smiles greeted photographers. Charitable work continued as planned. Yet those following palace developments closely noticed subtle shifts in media speculation. Articles began asking new questions. Television commentators revisited older controversies. Royal experts debated whether the institution itself was entering another period of significant transition. As pressure quietly mounted, the palace reportedly divided into different schools of thought. Some advisors believed the monarchy's greatest strength had always been its ability to handle sensitive matters privately. Others argued that withholding difficult truths often created even greater problems later. Neither side wanted unnecessary turmoil, but both feared different consequences if the situation continued unresolved. The debate was no longer simply about personalities. It had become a question of how history itself would judge the decisions made during this critical period. Then came the moment that allegedly changed everything. A trusted palace official entered the room carrying another folder that had not appeared on the original meeting agenda. The file looked ordinary from the outside, yet according to those rumors, its contents were anything but ordinary. Without speaking, the official quietly placed it in front of Prince William before stepping back toward the wall. William opened the cover, turned several pages in complete silence, then stopped on a single sheet. He reportedly looked across the table before calmly saying that everyone present needed to read one particular page before the discussion could continue. The room reportedly fell silent once again because whatever waited on that page was about to transform a private review into something none of those present had anticipated. The paper hit the dark mahogany table with a soft, heavy thud that seemed to echo through the high-ceilinged chamber. No one reached for it immediately. The ink on the page was decades old, faded to a dull sepia, yet the words typed across its surface carried an undeniable weight. Outside the towering arched windows,
It's terrible that after 50 years it is behind closed doors. And I've no intention, now I've started, to stop now. I'm determined to put an end to this.
the London sky was darkening into a bruised purple, but inside, the air had grown stiflingly thin. A senior legal counsel, who had spent 40 years advising the household on matters of state and discretion, leaned forward, his spectacles slipping slightly down his nose as his eyes scanned the opening lines. His hand trembled just enough for the edge of his cuff to catch the light. Across the room, a high-ranking palace courtier stood frozen near the marble fireplace, his knuckles white against the carved mantelpiece. Prince William did not sit down. He remained standing at the head of the table, his arms crossed, watching the slow, painful realization spread across the faces of the small group assembled in the private study. The document in front of them was not a leaked press report, nor was it a piece of tabloid gossip designed to sell weekend papers. It was an internal, restricted memorandum dated from a period many in the household had long considered buried. It detailed a series of administrative adjustments, private financial allocations, and strategic communication choices that had been quietly implemented during one of the most tumultuous decades in modern royal history. For hours, the room had been trapped in a tense debate over public perception, institutional integrity, and modern governance. But the moment that specific folder was unsealed, the entire nature of the discussion transformed from a policy review into a high-stakes confrontation with the past. The silence lasted for nearly a minute, broken only by the steady tick of a grandfather clock resting in the corner. When the legal advisor finally looked up, his expression was entirely stripped of its usual bureaucratic composure. He looked directly at the heir to the throne, his voice barely above a quiet whisper, as he acknowledged that if the contents of this specific record were ever made public without context, the damage to the crown's delicate standing would be immediate and severe. What unfolded in the hours that followed was an intense, secret inquiry held behind closed doors, far removed from the sight of camera lenses and press secretaries. The small circle of advisors, constitution experts, and long-serving household officials began a rigorous, line-by-line review of every communication attached to the primary file. They were not examining potential legal violations. Rather, they were unraveling a complex web of internal decisions, quiet agreements, and strategic maneuvers that had been crafted behind the scenes to shield specific individuals during moments of intense public scrutiny. Every page turned revealed another layer of carefully managed history. Every marginal note, handwritten in blue ink by hands that had long since retired from public life, pointed toward a concerted effort to control the narrative surrounding the royal household during its most vulnerable years. As the review deepened, a sharp and uncomfortable divide quickly emerged within the room. On one side stood the traditionalists, senior advisors who had served the previous reign and maintained deep ties to the established order. They argued with quiet desperation that these documents reflected necessary measures taken during an unprecedented era of media hostility. In their view, context was everything. They insisted that decisions made decades ago to protect key members of the family, including Queen Camilla, were entirely justified given the extraordinary pressure the institution faced at the time. To revisit those choices now, they argued, was not an act of moral courage, but a dangerous mistake that would only invite unnecessary chaos and undermine the current monarch. They pleaded for restraint, suggesting that the records remain where they had been for years, locked securely within the private archives. On the other side of the long table sat a younger faction of advisors, aligned with William's modern approach to institutional management. For them, the issue was not simply about what had happened in the past, but how the failure to address it now compromised the future. They argued that maintaining silence on historical maneuvers exposed the monarchy to perpetual vulnerability. If an external entity, a rogue researcher, or an unsealed historical lawsuit were to bring these internal communications to light, the narrative would be controlled by outsiders rather than the household itself. Transparency, they insisted, was no longer a PR option. It was the only realistic shield left to protect the crown's long-term reputation. The atmospheric tension inside the palace study reached a fever pitch as financial ledgers were laid alongside historical correspondence. Specialized forensic accountants, brought in under non-disclosure agreements that carried massive legal penalties, pointed to specific entries detailing private funds used to manage media relations and legal consultations during crucial transition periods. These were not public tax dollars but private household funds, yet the strategic way they were directed raised fundamental questions about influence, priority, and the internal politics that governed the palace during critical moments. Take a look at yourself right now. You are watching this story unfold, seeing how easily those in power protect their own interests while keeping the truth hidden behind heavy wooden doors. If you are the kind of person who turns a blind eye when the truth gets uncomfortable, then go ahead and click away right now. But if you actually care about honesty, if you believe that integrity matters regardless of titles or power, then you need to hit that like button immediately to show where you stand. Supporting this channel means demanding the truth, so do not scroll past without liking this video and ensuring you are subscribed to stand with us. As the hours stretched past midnight, the physical strain on everyone in the room became undeniable. Endless cups of black coffee were left half-drunk on silver trays, and the air was thick with the silent weight of competing loyalties. William listened intently to every argument, taking meticulous notes in a small leather-bound ledger. He did not interrupt the senior advisors when they defended past choices, nor did he encourage the younger courtiers when they pushed for immediate disclosure. His silence was described by those present as deeply unnerving. It was the calm of a leader who recognized that whatever choice was made next would ripple through the monarchy for decades to come. Then, just as the meeting seemed ready to adjourn for a mandatory recess, a junior archivist who had been tasked with cross-referencing the document dates re-entered the room. He carried a second, much smaller file, bound in faded yellow ribbon. He did not speak to the group. He walked straight to the center of the table and handed the file to the head of the legal team. When the ribbons were untied and the cover was flipped open, the room went dead silent once more. Contained within that second file was a single, hand-signed directive from years prior, an explicit instruction that directly contradicted the official historical account provided to both Parliament and the public. It was the missing link, the precise piece of evidence that proved key decisions regarding public roles and official standings had been systematically altered behind closed doors. William looked down at the newly uncovered directive, his expression hardening as he realized the full scope of what lay before him. The narrative was no longer just about management or media strategy. It was about an intentional pattern of decisions that directly impacted the current structure of the royal family itself. He looked up at the exhausted faces around him and spoke a single, quiet sentence that ended all debate for the night, making it clear that a formal, highly restricted family summit would have to be called immediately. The private phone line on the desk rang 3 times, sharp and cutting, before King Charles finally picked up the receiver with a trembling hand. The message delivered from the lower study was brief, but its impact was instantaneous. Within minutes, the king was pacing the narrow length of his private sitting room, his face pale and drawn under the dim lamplights. Across the corridor, behind closed doors where soft light seeped into the hallway, Queen Camilla sat in total silence, listening to the muffled, hurried footsteps of senior aides moving rapidly between offices. The news of the unsealed directive had traveled through the inner core of the palace like an electric current. The comfortable boundaries of protocol and polished public routines had dissolved in a single evening, leaving the royal household standing on the edge of an unprecedented internal crisis. King Charles was a father facing his eldest son, but he was also a sovereign, bound by a crown that demanded supreme loyalty above all personal affection. The psychological weight in the room was suffocating. For decades, Charles had worked tirelessly to secure a permanent, respected place for Camilla within the heart of the monarchy and in the eyes of a hesitant public. Every public appearance, every carefully orchestrated charitable effort, and every strategic media release over 20 years had been designed to build a foundation of stability and acceptance. Now, in the span of a few hours, the historical record brought forward by Prince William threatened to dismantle that carefully constructed reality. When father and son finally met in the small library later that night, no courtiers were permitted inside, no secretaries stood by to take notes. Outside the heavy oak door, 2 protection officers stood guard, hearing only the distant, low hum of voices rising and falling in tense, controlled exchanges. Charles reportedly pleaded for perspective, reminding William of the immense sacrifices made to bring unity to the family after years of public tragedy and scandal. He argued that dragging old administrative directives into the harsh light of the present would accomplish nothing except destroying the delicate peace the family had fought so hard to achieve. William, however, remained immovable. His demeanor was described by those familiar with the situation as remarkably calm, cold, and utterly detached from personal sentiment. For the heir to the throne, this was no longer a matter of family loyalty or past emotional wounds. It was a cold calculation regarding the survival and legitimacy of the crown in a rapidly changing world. William believed that if the public ever discovered the palace had quietly altered official records to smooth the path for Camilla's modern standing, the modern monarchy would lose the one thing it could not survive without: public trust. He made it clear that protecting the institution meant confronting the past directly, regardless of who stood in the way or how deeply it wounded personal relationships. Queen Camilla was not a passive observer in this developing storm. When she was briefed on the specific contents of the second file, her reaction was reportedly swift and resolute. She refused to accept the premise that decisions made decades ago were illegitimate. She maintained that every step taken during those turbulent years had been executed with the full knowledge and implicit approval of senior household officials aiming to stabilize a failing public image. To frame those actions now as deceptive or improper was, in her view, a profound betrayal of her years of dedicated service to the king and the nation. The emotional strain within the private quarters deepened with every passing hour. Conversations were short, sharp, and laden with unspoken accusations. King Charles found himself trapped in a devastating psychological vice. On one side stood the woman who had been his companion and confidant through the darkest storms of his life. On the other side stood his heir, representing the unavoidable future of the monarchy and carrying the weight of a rising generation that demanded uncompromising transparency. To side with Camilla meant risking a catastrophic rift with William and exposing the institution to severe public backlash if the documents were ever leaked. To side with William meant inflicting a devastating personal humiliation on his wife and dismantling years of deliberate court history. Look at the way you watch these events unfold. Most people like to think they stand for fairness, yet when hard choices demand real bravery, they retreat into comfortable excuses. If you are content to sit back and watch institutions twist the truth for their own convenience without speaking up, then go ahead and remain silent. But if you actually possess the moral courage to demand accountability, if you refuse to let powerful figures sweep the truth under the rug, then you need to act right now. Hit the subscribe button and turn on all notifications immediately. Standing with this channel means you refuse to be lied to, so prove you care about integrity before you move on to the next chapter. The divide quickly spread beyond the immediate family, sending tremors through every department of the royal household. Senior private secretaries who had dedicated their entire careers to maintaining seamless order were forced to take implicit sides. Whispers filled the corridors of Clarence House and Buckingham Palace as staff tried to anticipate the fallout. Some advisors urged the king to exercise his royal authority and order the files sealed permanently under state confidentiality acts. They pointed out that sovereigns throughout history had routinely buried uncomfortable truths to preserve the stability of the realm. However, legal experts brought in to assess the situation warned that hiding the records was no longer a viable option. Modern digital archiving, freedom of information requests, and the relentless pursuit of historical research meant that absolute secrecy was an illusion. Sooner or later, the paper trail would surface. If it came out while the palace was actively hiding it, the scandal would be 10 times worse. The only logical course of action, they argued, was to manage the disclosure internally before an external force dictated the terms. By 3 in the morning, the emotional exhaustion inside the palace was absolute. The initial anger had given way to a heavy, tragic resignation. King Charles sat alone in his office, looking out at the dark, silent gardens of the palace, fully aware that the quiet life he had built was changing forever. The personal trust between key members of the royal family had been fractured in ways that no public statement could ever mend. The past was no longer a quiet memory, it had become an active battlefield. Recognizing that the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control, Prince William formally demanded a definitive, binding summit. It would not be an informal chat over tea or a routine administrative review. It would be an extraordinary gathering of the most senior members of the royal family, top legal advisors and constitutional scholars. The goal of this summit was singular and absolute: to confront the contents of the sealed archive once and for all, and to make a final decision on Queen Camilla's future role within the royal structure. The date was set, the summons was issued, and as the first light of dawn broke over London, everyone involved knew that the outcome of this upcoming meeting would alter the course of royal history forever. The heavy brass doors of the council chamber slammed shut with a deafening boom that rattled the glass-framed portraits along the gallery wall. Inside, the temperature felt icy, almost unnaturally cold, as 6 people sat around a polished oval table that had remained untouched for official business since the turn of the century. No water glasses were touched, no notebooks were opened. At the head of the table sat King Charles, his hands folded tightly over a leather document case, his knuckles pale, his gaze fixed blankly at the far wall. To his right, Queen Camilla sat rigid, her face an unreadable mask of cold composure, though her fingers brushed continuously against the silk edge of her jacket. Opposite them stood Prince William, his stance unyielding, holding a single key tied to a brass tag. This was the restricted summit. Every phone in the wing had been disconnected. Private security personnel lined the outer perimeter, ensuring not a single word escaped into the palace corridors. The atmosphere was charged with a terrifying, suffocating intensity. William did not offer an opening statement or engage in subtle pleasantries. Instead, he stepped toward the center of the room, placed a heavy wooden box onto the mahogany surface, and used the key to turn the central lock with a sharp, mechanical click. Inside lay the complete, unredacted set of historical files, documents that had remained locked in a private vault for decades, under strict sovereign protection. The legal advisors sitting at the foot of the table shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with the monarch. Everyone in that room knew the gravity of the moment. The papers inside did not merely suggest administrative manipulation. They laid out a systematic, quiet restructuring of official royal protocols, specifically engineered to elevate Camilla's personal status, while shielding sensitive financial arrangements from parliamentary oversight. As William pulled the first folder from the box, he read aloud the verified dates and specific signatures recorded in the margins. The room remained dead silent. The details exposed how senior household officials had quietly altered internal governance guidelines, deliberately bypassing established constitutional traditions to secure guarantees for titles and funding during a time when public opinion was deeply hostile. Each sentence read felt like a physical blow to the stability of the room. The narrative wasn't constructed from media rumors or outside gossip. It was documented in the household's own ink, signed by individuals who had sworn to protect the crown above all else. King Charles attempted to intervene, his voice thick with emotion, as he reminded his son of the political reality of that era. He insisted that without those strategic adjustments, the royal household would have faced complete public collapse following years of brutal media scrutiny. He argued that survival required difficult, unorthodox decisions, and that protecting Camilla was integral to protecting his own ability to serve as monarch. William remained entirely unaffected by the emotional appeal. He pointed directly to the legal analysis provided by top constitutional scholars brought into the investigation. Their verdict was uncompromising. The institution could not maintain its moral authority while operating on administrative precedents built on concealed adjustments. The advisors made it abundantly clear that if these records were ever exposed through independent historical audits or legal challenges, the damage to public trust would be catastrophic and permanent. The choice was presented with brutal clarity: protect the individual or protect the crown. Ask yourself what kind of person you are when faced with uncomfortable realities. Are you someone who lets powerful figures sweep their mistakes under the rug just because it is easier to look away? If you lack the integrity to stand up for the truth, then keep scrolling and pretend none of this matters. But if you believe that accountability should apply to everyone, regardless of their title or royal blood, then prove it right now. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel immediately, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Show that you refuse to be manipulated by manufactured narratives, because if you stay silent now, you are complicit in hiding the truth. The debate shifted rapidly toward Queen Camilla's future within the official hierarchy of the monarchy. Senior advisors outlined potential courses of action designed to contain the fallout. They spoke in quiet, clinical terms about scaled-back public appearances, modified title usage, and a gradual reduction of official patronages. To Camilla, these measured proposals were nothing short of a public exile, an intentional stripping away of her place beside the king after decades of calculated effort to earn acceptance. Her response was quiet but razor-sharp, warning that attempting to rewrite her role to appease future leadership would only confirm to the public that the palace was hiding something far worse. The psychological tension reached its absolute peak as the constitutional experts revealed the final, most sensitive document in the stack. It was a private agreement sealed in a heavy lead envelope, stamped with a classification marking that had never appeared on any official registry. The room seemed to lose all air as William broke the wax seal. Inside was a handwritten record detailing a secret financial trust set up to manage private settlement arrangements related to historical family disputes, an arrangement that had been kept entirely hidden from both the treasury and the heir to the throne. The sight of that final document broke the last remnants of defense within the room. King Charles closed his eyes, unable to look at the paper lying open between them. The realization hit everyone present with terrifying force. The issue was no longer just about past public relations or title negotiations. It was an unvarnished record of secret decisions that permanently altered the internal mechanics of the royal family. With the evidence laid bare and no options left to debate, William slowly closed the folder and looked directly at his father. The ultimatum was unspoken, yet understood by every person in the chamber. The final archive was open, the truth was out in the open, and the royal household was forced to face a reality it had spent decades trying to avoid. The wax seal crumbled into fine red dust as Prince William pressed his thumb firmly against the final velvet box resting in the center of the vault. The private summit had concluded hours ago, yet the quiet aftermath inside the private chambers felt heavier than the confrontation itself. King Charles had retreated to his private quarters without issuing a public statement, leaving senior advisors and constitutional lawyers to manage the immediate fallout behind closed palace gates. The silence across the grounds was absolute, a stark contrast to the storm of speculation beginning to build among royal observers worldwide. According to confidential accounts from palace insiders, the decision regarding Queen Camilla's long-term standing within the institution had been quietly finalized during those final, exhausting moments behind closed doors. The bombshell revelation was not an allegation of illegal activity, but an unvarnished, long-hidden record of private decisions that permanently altered how key figures inside the palace viewed one of the most controversial chapters of modern royal history. The unsealed records confirmed that key administrative and financial arrangements made decades prior had been deliberately structured to ensure a smooth transition of power and public acceptance, regardless of official protocols. For those who had dedicated their lives to preserving the crown's image, the discovery exposed a quiet truth that could never be unlearned. The narrative of an effortless, modern royal transition was irrevocably fractured, replaced by a complex reality of strategic compromise and hidden power dynamics. In the days following the secret review, subtle shifts began taking place throughout the royal household. Engagements were quietly reassessed, Official schedules were modified with surgical precision, and the public profile of the Queen was carefully recalibrated to reflect a new, understated dynamic. The palace worked tirelessly to contain the psychological fallout, ensuring the public saw only seamless duty and unwavering stability. Yet behind the polished exterior, the personal trust between key members of the royal family had been permanently altered. The delicate balance between preserving historical tradition and safeguarding future legitimacy had forced a painful, irreversible rift at the very top of the monarchy. If you are the kind of viewer who ignores the truth just because it makes you uncomfortable, then you can easily walk away and pretend none of this ever happened. But if you truly care about honesty, integrity, and the future of the monarchy, you cannot sit idly by while history is written in secret. Hit the subscribe button right now, leave a like, and tell us in the comments whether you believe public trust is worth sacrificing personal loyalty. Your voice matters, so do not stay silent when the truth demands to be heard. Yet as the final folders were placed back into the steel vault, the archivist noticed a small, unmarked key left at the bottom of the iron safe, a key that unlocked a secondary compartment containing an encrypted ledger tagged with a single, handwritten warning. The documents William brought forward were only the beginning. The most sensitive file, detailing an undisclosed private agreement between the palace and international media executives made during the height of a past crisis, reportedly remains sealed, leaving one chilling question unanswered. Was William's revelation merely the first layer of a far bigger royal secret? In our very next story, we open that secondary vault to examine the unreleased media pact that threatened to expose every major royal secret in modern history, including a private letter written by Prince Philip that was ordered to be destroyed the moment it was received. You cannot afford to miss what comes next, because the single sentence written in that destroyed letter changes everything you thought you knew about the crown.